All right, welcome everybody. I think probably a few more people will pour in the next few minutes, but let's go ahead and get started. So for anybody new tonight, this is obviously a meditation class. Meditation, the most important thing I can tell you about meditation is that meditation is not about you. It's not about your personality. It's not here to entertain you. It's not here to heal you. It is not here to make you a better person. It's not here to please some God. Meditation is nothing more than an opportunity to see what you are when this shallow layer of personality stops yammering away at you. This personality has you pushing and pulling and rejecting everything in front of you every moment of your day. And this world becomes just a sea of everybody else's pushing and pulling. And so it becomes very difficult to get away from. Meditation is a way to get away from it long enough to see what you are without it. And what you are without it is something so vast, so deep, so effortlessly intelligent. But it's almost something you can't talk about. You just have to steep yourself in it. And in the beginning, it's just going to look like a kind of comfort, a peace that gets you a better night's sleep. But the longer you stay there, the more time you spend there, the more you come to understand what you are. So the goal of a class like this is to set you on that journey and remind you that you care. You know, if you didn't care about that journey at least a little, you wouldn't be here. But that caring, it's like a candle flame that life just blows it out so easily in the beginning. And so it's helpful to have a place that you can come back to week after week to have someone just light that for you again. And so I see that as my purpose and the purpose of this class. So how do we meditate? We make a choice for where we're going to place our attention, and we sustain that choice. Any technique that asks you to sustain a choice is a meditation technique. In this class, we work on the breath. We work with the breath because you're breathing all day long. And so it sets you up to have a technique that you can use in absolutely any circumstance. So we place our attention high in the body, right up here at the forehead and crown. You let your eyes just fall to a spot on the desk or the floor in front of you, and you just begin to breathe. As you breathe in, you're right there with that inhale, 100% aware. As you breathe out, you ride that exhale all the way down, and you just stay there watching every nook and cranny, every phase of the breath, the simplicity of just the breath. And when the mind comes in to try and take you away, you just don't play with it. You just return to the breath, return to the breath, return to the breath, over and over again. So why don't we practice that now? If there's a question about that, you can interrupt me right now and ask it. Okay. So attention at the forehead and crown. Just let your eyes stay open, but fall to a spot on the floor or the desk in front of you, just to get them out of the way. And become from that point on the watcher of your breath. Let it be that simple. Nothing to achieve, nothing to understand, nothing to figure out. Just the simplicity of breathing here in this moment. Let's do that. How much of yourself can you yield to the breath? How much can you give? Now, what if instead of clinging to the breath with your concentration, you just made it your home for a while? What if you just abided in that breath? In other words, as you give your attention to that breath, let go of the part of yourself that you're fighting against. And just step in gentle willingness into the breath. What if you just let yourself be comfortable? What if you just let the breath move right through you, touching everything in its path? What if you just released your resistance to this moment? Would that be so crazy? To not fight the moment you're living in? Would that be so counterintuitive? To unfold into this moment with gentleness and ease. Here you are in a room, watching your breath. Can't that be enough? So let's talk a little bit. Before we got started, one of you asked a question about blockages, how they happen, and how we release them. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's start with an analogy, I guess. I think the most obvious analogy is light. So, sunlight, white light, contains every color in the spectrum. Okay? It has everything, at least for the purposes of this conversation. But that light has to bounce off of things, and so when that light bounces off of things, it produces color, because everything in its own unique way absorbs some colors and reflects others. Or for example, let's say you have a piece of glass or a crystal of some sort. As the light moves through that, the way that crystal is shaped changes what kind of light it emits. So the things of this world emit light and emit specific colors and patterns and shapes based on their nature. You come into this world in a specific shape. You have a specific patterning of your body made up through your DNA. But you also have patterns of your mind. You come in with tendencies that are linked into your body, but they also go deeper than that, into your spiritual self. Anybody who has ever had children or knows people intimately who have had children, you can see how babies come in with their own personality long before you've had a chance to condition them. Conditioning occurs, and that changes how the light moves through, and it changes what kind of colors project. But there's a unique projection from the moment you're born. There are calm babies, there are cranky babies, there are energized babies. I don't have any babies, so I've run out of adjectives for babies, but the point remains. And as you move through life, because you have a patterning to yourself that affects how you project your life into existence, you're going to find some doors are open to you, some doors are closed to you, other doors, they're kind of open, but you're going to have to really, really work for it. And in working for it, you're going to have to change. The crystal that is you will have to change to be able to emit the pattern that opens that door. There are some doors where, your entry into life is just so out of sync with what's on the other side of that door that even if you can kick it open, which you usually can, keeping it open is going to be just almost more work than it's worth. So any bold and adventuresome spirit, who has moved through life and tried to go where they want to go and has been met with obstacles understands that experience. Sometimes it's just during certain phases of your life, doors are closed to you. Sometimes it's doorways of understanding, doorways of being able to cognitively reframe a situation so that you see it differently, so that you can let go of some suffering. So, there's a few things I want to just say from the outset, and that is, blockages are not a problem. You're supposed to have some. If you were completely unblocked, you would go insane. And that's the truth. If all your blockages lifted at once, you would go insane. And I know that because I help people lift blockages. And if I lift too many of them too quickly for a person, without really putting them through the work that it takes to get a blockage lifted, I've learned the hard way that they get thrown way out of balance. So those blockages, they're actually your friend. Those blockages are kind of the guardrails on making sure that you change and grow at a pace that is reasonable for you. But you do get to a point on a spiritual path where you decide anything that's blocking me has to be put aside. And at first, when you're still young and a little ignorant, you think that means that anywhere you can think of to go, you need to be able to go. But the funny thing is, the more places you get to, the more things you achieve, the more you realize it's all the same thing. And when you start to realize that, then your movement through life and your interaction with blockages becomes different. It becomes more a matter of, what am I actually meant to be doing? And you start just kind of listening to the song of your own personal patterning. And you start moving in that direction. Now, I understand the question is asked probably from a perspective of, I'm suffering, I'm in pain and I want to know how to get those blockages lifted. Why are they happening, and how do I move past it? I can answer that question. The reason they're happening is because you have woven them into your belief systems. So, you've got this mind, which is constantly telling stories. This mind is constantly holding together a very intricate story about every single person in your world. It's a story about your job. It's a story about every person in your world. It's a story that contains your entire past. It's a story that even projects into the future. You've got it all figured out. And you think you understand the characteristics of people and life. And what you haven't figured out yet, nor would you, it's normal that you haven't figured it out, is that to a large extent, life doesn't have a lot of hard and fast characteristics. Everything you have right now, you could disassemble it and build in another direction if you needed to. If you were already going in the direction that is in line with your patterning, then it wouldn't matter that some doors are closed. It wouldn't matter because you would be walking to the beat of your own drum. You would be moving to the rhythm of your own song. But sometimes we've got stories that really it's just a shallow twisting of a story. It's not really about your personal life pattern. It's just that you've picked up an idea about how life is and how things have to be. And so you start to get a little stuck. And usually it's a story about something bad that you think is going to happen if that stuck spot releases. For a lot of people, if they're trying to build a business, that story is that they won't be able to keep up with the success, and so they become afraid of success. For others, it's a story maybe about trusting and loving, and maybe they have had experiences in their past where they were hurt, maybe even in very early childhood. And so there's a story that if they open their heart, they're going to get hurt. But it's usually your past experiences that cause the blockage. The way to unblock that, and this has to happen in your own moment of readiness, you'll know when you're ready, is to go ahead and accept the pain you're afraid of feeling. It's to go ahead and just let life touch that bruised space inside of you. Let that clenched fist open up so that the blood can start rushing back in, and go ahead and just feel that pain. Now, that is easier said than done. And you might not be ready for some of the big blockages that you've really got your eye on, and that's okay. Here's how you get to those big blockages. You start by working on the ones you can work on. Take a look at your life. What do you like? What don't you like? Where are your triggers? What sort of unnecessary things do you get upset about? And if you don't have the self-awareness to figure that out, what are the people close to you complaining about when they deal with you? Good place to start. And start working on those things that you think you can work on. Start breaking some of your habits. Start finding little ways to change. When you do that, you start to just collect personal power. And the more you do that, the more those bigger changes will start to look doable to you. And then a moment will come where you can just go ahead and make a choice deep within your heart to open yourself up to that thing you're afraid of. just because all things lead to approximately the same place, and most of the things people want to achieve don't bring them happiness, sometimes you still have to achieve them in order to realize that. Almost always. But the answer is to walk into the pain. You know, when I first started meditating, I was a distraction to my teacher and the other students because I had so much pain in my body. And, you know, when you're sitting in meditation, the way that we do it traditionally, where you're on a cushion and you have a straight spine. And, you know, I had had spinal meningitis, which causes little adhesions in your spine. So for me, I was in a lot of pain. And, you know, you sit there and you start to create a story around it. You start to think that, okay, we're 5 minutes in and I'm starting to be in pain. That means I'll be in this much more pain in 10 minutes and even more pain in 15 minutes until, you know, my head explodes or whatever this ultimate pain is. And so you're constantly finding little ways to shift, little ways to avoid the pain. And it was just getting disruptive to people because people can feel that, you know. We're all very sensitive, especially those of us who practice spiritually. And so I had gotten to a point where I was like, I almost had to leave the room early just because I didn't want to disrupt everybody else's practice, which was, of course, unacceptable to me. I had moved to a small island to study with my teacher. And so I made a decision that, okay, I need to start working with this. And so I actually went up into the mountains. There was this giant national park that was with a mountain at the top of this island. And I would go to the top of it and I would practice sitting on rocks. And I would just go ahead and just deal with pain. And I would fight it and just worked with it a lot like that. And I don't know, at some point, this thing happened where I was sitting in my meditation room and the pain was starting to come. And deep inside of myself, I had kind of shown my subconscious over and over again, walk into the pain, walk into the pain. And in that moment, I remember thinking, okay, well, what if it were just okay that I was in blinding pain? What if just blinding, excruciating pain were 100% acceptable in this moment? And in that moment, all the pain left my body and never, ever returned. I can sit as long as I want now, and there's no pain. That didn't come from the right stretch. That didn't come from, you know, any trick. It came from dropping my resistance to the thing I was afraid of. That's how you clear a blockage. I've told that story before, but it's an important story because that is how you ultimately clear a blockage. That thing you're avoiding, you have a destiny with it, and you have to meet that destiny at some point. But that doesn't mean you have to throw yourself completely out of balance when you're doing it. You can work your way up to it. The truth is you have a million little things you're avoiding in a day just to not have a little discomfort. Maybe it's waking up 15 minutes earlier so that you can get something done. Maybe it's just choosing to sit for 15 minutes a day in meditation practice and really deciding you're going to do it. Okay? Those are small things, small wins, small discomforts you're avoiding that you can suddenly decide to face that will help you start building up to the bigger ones. I'll tell you the biggest one is your avoidance of death. Almost everything you're avoiding is really just a splinter off of the big stick of death that you're avoiding. We avoid our own mortality. But your mortality is your best friend. If you can keep your mortality close, you'll make better decisions because you'll realize you only have so much time. But in the meantime, deal with the small stuff. Then take a look at what's really, really causing you suffering. And then go after that. Go after the thing first. The thing that you think is going to make the biggest difference. There's usually a thread you can pull that has a whole bunch of your other stuff connected to it. But you have to work on the small ones first. Most people do, unless you're incredibly stable. You know, it's a marathon, not a race. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So Amrita is asking, how do you recognize the thread? Well, usually a teacher helps you recognize the thread. But if I were going to tell you how to recognize it on your own, let me just sit with that for a second. See, the way a teacher recognizes it is we get to know you, we work with you regularly, and we start to hear all your stories and we know all of your patterns. And it's easier for us to see it for two reasons. One, because we're not you. And two, because we've worked out so many of our own threads. But I think first, what you would want to do is you would want to look at all the things that you want in your life but don't do because you're afraid. So what kind of times in your life have you wanted to speak up but fear kept you from doing it? Wanted to move forward but fear kept you from doing it? Wanted to grow in some new way but fear kept you from doing it? Wanted to change in some way, but your belief in your capability wasn't there? Those are the areas that you have to work on. So what you do is you would sit down and say, okay, if I was somebody who could do that, what would the steps be? And so you would write it out, all right? Imagine somebody who is capable of walking through that fear. You know, you can even find someone who's already done it and ask them what the steps were. And then ask yourself, okay, so what would my steps be if I were going to do that? And then start walking those steps. Walk them one at a time. Go ahead and shake and be afraid, but take the next step. Take the next step until you get there. You might get there and realize, this is garbage. This is not anything like what I thought it was going to be. I'm at a bit of a place like that in my life right now. And so you know what? You walk some new steps. It's fine. I've collapsed my life and rebuilt it many times. What else are you going to do? You've got these years on this planet. You can live several lives. But that's how you do it. You figure out what the steps are, and then you just put yourself through it. You walk them even though you're afraid. And you reach out for support and assistance wherever you can. You know, you get your ducks in a row to help you be successful, and you just persevere. But be prepared. Be prepared to get what you want and realize it's not what you need. The truth is, if we knew what we needed, we'd be much, much happier. But that's okay. Because in that process of getting there, you will have become a different person, and that's what spiritual growth is. So you just start pulling another thread. But as some of the fears that kept you from walking that path, those are going to be some of the same fears blocking you on some of those other threads, some of those things that, you know, part of you feels like you should be doing, but you're afraid to do. And so that's what I mean, where if you pull one thread, there's a lot of things connected to it. You don't just expand linearly, you expand out in all directions. and your mind changes, your relationship with life, it changes because you understand it differently. The story has to change. This little play we created. Okay, let's see. So someone is saying, I'm struggling with knowing what I want at the moment. From a person who had her entire life planned out to me now who doesn't have a single day planned or know what I want. That's fine. That's not a problem. How do you want to feel? That's what you need to figure out. If you really, truly don't have anything planned, anything in mind, how do you want to feel? How do you want to approach every moment of this day? Start practicing that feeling, and then do something, anything. Find a way to serve. If you genuinely don't have something that you in your heart need to do, then just figure out how you want to feel and find a way to use that to go serve. Go work somewhere where you can make a difference. And it doesn't matter what level you work at there. Just go be a part of something. You have to build in this life. You have to keep building. But sometimes, if you've kind of been spun around so many times that the stories have all lost their meaning, which is a space I understand very well, then you just kind of look up and say, how can I best serve? And go do that. But your real heart's journey is, how do I want to feel? What kind of feelings do I want to project forward? And you work on that. You work on that in your meditation. You know, there's, if you have trouble flowing those feelings, there is a training on my website, bodymindtapping.com, called Heart Training. And that's actually something you could work with. It's a modification of the ancient Tibetan practice of Tonglen, where you basically breathe in the suffering of the world and breathe out the antidote. That would help you clear that. I would highly recommend that for you, to make a practice of that. It's free. You can go there and just play the video. Great. You're here to unfold, everybody. You're here to let your consciousness unfold into this crazy world that you've been plopped into. And you should grow until the day you die. Grow until it's time to leave this world. It's not a long life. It's okay if it hurts. It's okay to be in pain. It's so temporary. So face it. Stand open in the face of it. Doesn't mean you have to suffer abuse. Doesn't mean you can't make choices to walk into better things. But those avoidances that are just keeping you from where you genuinely want to go, stand up in the face of those avoidances and walk right into them as you feel ready. It's really the direction that matters. If you're walking towards that, you're doing your job as a person. Doesn't matter how long it takes you to get to the mother lode of your avoidances. But every day, are you doing something to walk in that direction? That's what matters. And if you never fully get there, leave this life walking in the right direction. Because at the end of the day, all places lead to the same thing anyways, which is absolutely nowhere. It's the journey that matters. It's the expansion that matters. So just give yourself to it. Don't worry about the results. Just worry about expanding in the right direction for you. And the more information you have, the better decisions you'll make, and that's all fine. So I think I'd like us now to just go back into the silence a little bit and just kind of let some of that sink in. And I'd like you to kind of just think about that a little bit this week. I'd like you to carry that with you this week. And if there are any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them further. All right, let's go back into meditation. Just step back into the simplicity of your breath. Because why not? What else do you really have to do in this moment? Attention at the forehead and crown, eyes open on a spot in front of you, and be right there with your breath. okay, everybody. Thank you so much for your questions tonight. They really do add a lot to the class. And I will be here again next week for anybody who would like to show up. I think I'm going to close things up for the night, and I hope you all have a really great night. Thank you.